Hello students, this is the next in your sequence of sessions on error types in grammar, right. This time we are looking at what we call idiom and diction. Now what do we really mean by the word idiom? Idiom really means something which does not have a grammatical explanation behind it. In other words, where does it come from? It comes out of tradition. It's just the way people use things, it's just the way they speak, and there are certain structures that we accept simply because they are in use and not because they have any explanation behind them. And you recognize what these things are. They are either the idioms that we call idioms, okay, that is idiomatic structure. We have these things that do not translate literally, but when I have a bone to pick, it means I have a complaint against you. When I say a dark horse, I mean something that is someone who was not considered a possible success but actually succeeded. So these are idioms. They do not have any way that we can explain them, but these are more in the nature of vocabulary, right. But idiomatic structures also exist. So even the use of idioms or metaphors or proverbs or similes are idiomatic because they are vocabulary terms which do not have an explanation. Or you can have grammatical structures like phrasal verbs. We talked about that as well earlier, right, where I have a verb with a preposition which simply by itself has to be used because it provides you with a certain what shall we say, a certain meaning. Alright, let us go on and see what other kinds of idiomatic structure we deal with. Now idiomatic structure that comes into structure of sentences are like these. We call them idiomatic fixed expressions. Sometimes we alter the grammar rules just out of tradition. It says, now when you say it's ages since we met, it actually translates to it is ages since we met. So typically it has to be it has been ages since we met, but we don't say that. It's just an idiomatic structure. It's accepted to say it's ages that we met. Then conventional phrases as in idioms, once in a blue moon, we looked at that. Now what about alteration in word order, right? Now that's idiomatic as well. Now when you say it may well be that, you actually would say it well may be that would typically be the way you want to say it, but idiomatically we say it may well be that. Is there any explanation? No, there isn't. You just have to remember it and watch for it in the reading that you do. And when we say as regards, it's simply a phrase which is idiomatic. Where is the explanation behind it? Or in the first instance, again no explanation behind it, or on either hand, or on every hand. All of these are what we call idiomatic fixed expressions. They are used in very specific, let us say for very specific purposes, but there is no way of saying that there is a certain reason behind its use that way. You just have to watch for them in your reading, you have to pay attention to them when you see, and try and spot them and ensure that you spot them so that you do not miss them for something that is actually let us say a mistake, or if they are given differently then you have to correct them. Alright, let us move on a bit. So what can be the possibilities with these errors? Now for instance, if you take your standard idiom, a red herring is something that you use to mislead someone. You can't add to it, you can't say a very red herring. You can't delete anything also. When you say someone has a sweet tooth, it means that they really enjoy sweets. You can't just say that they have a tooth that is sweet, and you can't say they have a sour tooth, for instance. You can't do that. It can only be a sweet tooth. You can't substitute. Now if you take the long and the short of it as an idiom, you can't say the long and the fat of it. You can only say the long and the short of it. You can't modify them. Now we normally say lock, stock and barrel when we mean everything. You can't say stock, barrel and lock. You can't change degree. Now when we say someone is going to be in hot water, you can't say he is going to be in hotter water. We might do that conversationally, but as an idiomatic structure we can't do that. You can't change voice. We normally say he spilled the beans. He spilled the beans meaning he gave out the secrets. You can't say the beans were spilled. Alright. So these are the idioms, have to be used exactly the way they are. You can't alter them or play around with them unless you are doing it in conversation with people who know what you are talking about, but it would not count as a correct use. Okay. Let us move on. Now we come to what we call diction. Now diction essentially is the choice of words that you use in a sentence. Typically when you are talking about words that need to be used in their correct meaning or form or context, or words that actually contribute to clearness or effectiveness of the sentence that you want to deliver. And we make, and between elements that we use in that sense, typically these are choices of words where it's not just the thought word, it's more the structural word, right. And your typical errors would be between, like words between among and between, or between like and as, or between either of or both. And sometimes with certain words like accept or agree, or ability or capacity, rise, raise. Again, there are many of these. We can't really discuss all of them in one little session. You got to watch for these things and ensure that you actually have the right word for the right context, right. It's very much like, do we look at supplement or complement? Now a supplement is something that you actually add to something and make it part of, whereas a complement is something that you bring along with something though it is not part of. So, I need to have the right words for the right context, and that is what we call diction. Okay. We will look at a few samples just so that we can get this up, but the fact is we will never be able to do all of them in a small session. You have got to watch for them in the reading that you do, but the samples that follow will give you some sense of what we are dealing with. Okay. Let us move on. So, let us look at a sentence here. It says, though it will lead to public outcry, health authorities have decided that patients with avian flu will be allotted beds between those with swine flu. Now, doesn't seem like there is a grammatical error here, but if you visualize it, you are saying patients with avian flu will be allotted beds between those with swine flu. That means they will alternate. I will have one swine flu patient, then a avian flu patient, then a swine flu patient, and so on and so forth. Obviously, we are saying that you decided to put them into wards along with these people. So, what should we have? That patients with avian flu will be allotted beds among those with swine flu, not between. Between would actually talk about between two, among would mean among a lot, right. So, over here we need among, between is wrong. Let us look at the next one. Even though it will place extra demands on government hospitals, authorities have directed that either of avian flu and swine flu patients be hospitalized. Very clearly you recognize that again it does not seem to have a grammatical error, but the sense of it is actually that both of them must necessarily be hospitalized. So, it can't be either. Authorities have directed that both avian flu, and if I say both I do not need of, if I say either I need either of, but either of would mean this or that. Here we are saying both. So, that both avian flu and swine flu patients be hospitalized, alright. So, this is your difference between and among and your either of and both. Let us move on. This one says, unpleasant though the truth is, we must agree that it is our disregard for basic hygiene that leads to many of our illnesses. Again, it does not seem wrong, but you recognize what the sentence wants to say. It says we must acknowledge the fact that it is our problem. We not agree. We must recognize that it is because of what we did that something happened. So, over here the word you want is accept, not agree. Unpleasant though the truth is, we must accept that it is our basic disregard that leads to many of our illnesses. So, you recognize what we mean by diction. You have to be very clear about how a particular word is used and the context is actually accurate and relevant. Okay. What about this one? Despite his advanced age, he still has the ability for long hours of work. Long hours of work is a totality that someone actually takes care of. So, over here the word can't be ability. You do not have ability for long hours, you have a capacity for long hours of work. So, that is your difference between ability and capacity, right. So, now you know what we mean then. So, I can't go take you through too many examples. You have to watch for this kind of stuff. There are lots of words that like this that we get confused between. We do not know whether we should use this or that. Now, if you are very, very clear about the usage and the context, then you can actually handle all these diction based or this appropriate use based areas. Okay. Let us just move on. One standard pair of words that we get confused between is what we have by way of like and as. Like, let us not forget this, like is about similarity, as is about sameness. So, let us look at the statements here. Kerala Tourism is promoting the idea of homestays where guests are treated as members of family. That means you get a guest, that person becomes a member of your family. Whereas it should actually be Kerala Tourism is promoting the idea of homestays where guests are treated like members of family. So, when you get a guest, you will give them real royal treatment the way you treat your family. It is the way you treat and not that they will become your family. Therefore, the first statement is wrong, the second statement is right, unless you are actually expanding your family by including all your guests in it thereafter, which you know is not logically correct, right. And therefore, statement 2 is correct, statement 1 is wrong. Difference between like and as, alright. Let us move on.